the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh. When care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.
Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to a new episode of Let's Talk. First of all, I'd like to welcome our guest, Dr. Hatim Al-Hajj, Dean of the Sharia Academy USA. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
And our in-studio audience. Assalamu alaikum. Today's subject is obsession and treatments. If you've ever noticed yourself doing something over and over again for absolutely no reason, you may be obsessed. So I'd like to first of all turn over the floor to Dr. Hatim, and he can give a 10-minute introduction, inshallah.
Well, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah. All praise be to Allah and blessings and peace be on His last messenger. Obsessions are a symptom of a condition that some people have, which is common, and a lot of people know about it, which is obsessive-compulsive disorder. People may reach the threshold of having this full-blown diagnosis of obsessive-compulsive disorder, or they could have obsessions on random basis that would not qualify them for the full-blown diagnosis of obsessive-compulsive disorder. But obsessions basically would be repeated thoughts, repetitive, recurrent thoughts that you have no control over, and you cannot resist and you cannot end. So you're obsessing about the condition of your purity, you're obsessing about the perfection of your prayer, you're obsessing about the cleanliness of your garment, you're obsessing about so many things. Some people obsess about, germs, for instance.
Yeah. And
they need to wash their hands like several times before they can feel clean. And at times people could do this like 30 times or more. And
so to be obsessive, you don't necessarily have OCD.
Well, obsession is the name of the symptom, which is if it reaches a certain threshold, then you would be, diagnosed as OCD or obsessive-compulsive disorder. But some people could have the symptom with regard to a particular matter, and some people can have a wider scope of symptoms in various areas of life. And the severity of the condition varies. So some people may obsess about one or two things here and there that do not impede them in terms of, impeding your lifestyle, changing your lifestyle, forcing a different lifestyle that you're not really keen on having or interested in. And so if it changes your lifestyle, if it impedes you, if it hinders you from performing, then it is pathological. It's not normal.
So that's basically the harmful effect of obsessive compulsive or obsession.
Of obsessions, yeah.
So exactly what are the categories of the different obsessions?
Well, the categories of obsessions. From a practical viewpoint, you obsess about, your acts of worship, or you obsess about other things. My focus would be about how to handle or manage or tackle obsessions when it comes to your deen, when it comes to your religious commitment, when it comes to your beliefs, your religious convictions, and the acts of worship and various manifestations of religious commitment. And then there are obsessions about other, myriad of other things. Some people obsess about their handwriting, for instance, and so they could actually erase what they wrote several times before they are satisfied. with their handwriting.
Is that necessarily a harmful thing, though? I mean, can't somebody obsess about something and be successful at it, for example?
There is the fine line between perfectionism and obsession. And people who are perfectionists, they may have also sort of the borderline anxiety. So borderline anxiety, a degree of an anxiety anyway, about your work is healthy, because you need to be careful and you need to be, sort of vigilant. But once this degree of an anxiety causes you impediment, hindrance, then it is not good anymore. So if you perfect your wudu in the sense of making sure that you wash every limb or every part or organ the way it should be washed, you do not leave any spot dry that should have been washed, and so on, that's called wara. That's called, pious caution.
Pious caution, okay.
So wara, or pious caution, is certainly commendable. You do need to have wara. And
so how do you know that you've gone over the threshold where it becomes harmful?
How do you know that you've gone over the threshold? If you, for instance, need to repeat your wudu every time.
Every time, yeah.
If you need to repeat your wudu more than one time, most of the people do not repeat their wudu, every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes, every once in a while, on a random basis, you may need to repeat your wudu because you feel that you've not washed a certain part. But once you see that you need to do this most of the time, then that's not normal, because most of the people don't do that.
So I guess like one of the important things is just moderation in when it comes to religious practices.
Absolutely, because our religion is the religion of moderation in the first place, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribes moderation for us in the Quran. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prescribed moderation for us in his hadith. He says, "Saddidu wa qaribu," aim at your target, try to hit your target, or come close, which leaves some room for people to be capable of handling the realities of life, because life is not sterile.
Yeah.
And once you attempt to tackle the realities of life, you will find out that basically you will freeze unless you're ready to handle a little bit of imperfection.
Yeah.
Even in your da'wah, even in your ibadah, in your da'wah. For instance, if your recitation of the Quran is not perfect, should you not pray at night? Should you not make qiyamul layl because you want to perfect your recitation? You could be delaying yourself for years. If you go out to give da'wah, you will find out that
there are a lot of barriers.
Very often you will encounter problems, and you may fall into mistakes. So the possibility of falling into mistakes, if it hinders you, if it keeps you from providing da'wah, then certainly that is unhealthy.
That's a danger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, nothing is perfect. Nothing is 100% in life.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're going to take a break now, and we'll be back, inshallah, for more.
اللهم إني أسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف والغنى اللهم إني أسألك الهدى والتقى والعفاف
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for staying with us. At this moment, we're going to take some questions from our audience. Go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
Alaikum
salam wa
salam.
rahmatullah.
I would like to start off to say, if one is obsessed and is the bad for that person, how does he counter his obsession in Islamic way?
Well, yeah, Islam gave us a roadmap as to countering obsessions. It starts with a basic principle of fiqh called legal maxim or legal principle of fiqh, which says al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak. Certainty is not negated by doubt. Certainty is not negated by doubt. It's called legal maxim. It's called actually comprehensive major legal maxim, qa'idatun fiqhiyya kulliyya kubra, because it permeates throughout the body of fiqh. Fiqh regulates, fiqh is the discipline that studies the rulings of our actions, whether those actions are interactions with Allah, ibadat, or our interactions with His creation, muamalat. So throughout the body of fiqh, you have this particular legal principle that permeates through the body of fiqh. It's like a thread that connects the pearls of fiqh. And al-yaqeen la yazul bil-shak is the second legal principle out of 5 major comprehensive ones. Certainty is not negated by doubt. How does that help you with obsessions? When you're certain of one thing and you have any doubts, you cast the doubt away. If you're certain that you made wudu before you prayed dhuhr, and then you doubt whether you broke your wudu afterwards or not, you cast the doubt away. If you're certain that this water was at one point, which is the default for water, pure, and you have doubt whether it became impurified, then you cast the doubt away. If you're certain that your garment was clean, and then you start to have doubts about your garment, you cast the doubt away. And you go back to the default, and the default is purity. So if we truly understand this particular principle of fiqh, it will help us a lot with obsessions. Beside this general guideline or this general guidance, we have specific guidance, because most of the time obsessions afflict the practicing Muslims regarding the salah and the tahara. Because the salah is, the main pillar after Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, our main and most important pillar, the distinction between iman and faith or belief and disbelief is the salah. So, a Muslim is expected to be worried about his salah. The healthy worry, the healthy anxiety about perfection of the salah, yet sometimes the shaitan wants to cause us grief and distress, لِيَحْزُنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so that he may cause grief and distress for the believers. So he whispers into our heads that you did not perfect your wudu, you did not do this, you did not do that, or you broke your wudu. We have a beautiful hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ gives us a little prescription for obsession with regard to the breaking of the wudu issue. He says, إذا وجد أحدكم في بطنه شيئا فلا ينصرف فلا يخرجن من المسجد فلا ينصرف. Different reports. حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. If one of you feels some gurgling in his stomach, let him not depart from the masjid. Let him not stop the prayer or leave the prayer, exit from the prayer or depart from the masjid until he hears a sound or he finds some odor, smells an odor. And this is an authentic hadith reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Abi Huraira and others. So what does this hadith tell us? It tells us that the Prophet ﷺ was very keen to save us from the evil of obsessiveness, particularly with regard to purification. There are other hadith as well. When you are praying and you doubt whether you prayed 3 rak'ahs or 4 rak'ahs, what do? You have a hadith that's reported by Muslim from Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِذَا شَكَّ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِ فَلَمْ يَدْرِ صَلَّى ثَلَاثًا أَمْ أَرْبَعًا فَلْيَطْرَحِ الشَّكَّ وَلْيَبْنِ عَلَى مَا اسْتَيْقَنَ. When one of you doubts his prayer, and he doesn't know whether he prayed 3 or 4 rak'ahs, let him cast the doubt away, and let him proceed according to certainty, what he's certain of. So if you're doubting whether you prayed 3 or 4, consider yourself to have prayed 3, not 4, because that's certainty. You're certain that you prayed 3 at least, and you're doubting whether you prayed the 4th or not. But what if someone has a recurrent problem with this?
Yeah.
There is another hadith that addresses this issue, which is a hadith that's reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that when you doubt your prayer, إِذَا شَكَّ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِ فَلْيَتَحَرَّ الصَّوَابِ. When you have doubt in your prayer, try to sort out what is more likely. Try to sort out what's more likely. Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam al-Layth ibn Sa'd said that this applies to one who has a recurrent problem, versus the one who randomly doubts whether he prayed 3 or 4 rak'ahs. The one who has a recurrent problem, the Prophet ﷺ gave him a different prescription, because the Prophet used to tailor the prescriptions. There is no one generic prescription, like one size fits all. In many matters, sometimes there is, but in many matters you need to tailor your prescription. So in this case, one who has this recurring problem.
There's no problem if you're praying and it doesn't happen all the time, but you doubt whether you made 1 or 2 rak'ahs, and so you doubt yourself and you fix the problem. But if this happens frequently, it becomes obsessive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
So do we have any other questions from the audience?
I would like to thank Dr. Hatem first for his explanation of this issue, and I would like to ask him about Imam Malik said that if someone has a doubt about his ablution, his wudu, he should go and make another wudu again. Is that and other scholars differed about that and said they don't have to do this. What is the preferred opinion, in your opinion, sir?
Well, the preferred position, Imam Malik actually used the same principle, but he had a different interpretation of the same principle, which is al-yaqin la yazul bil-shak, certainty is not negated by doubt. So for Imam Malik, certainty is not negated by doubt means that you need to be certain you need to make certain for your prayer, because your prayer is very valuable. So he took the very principle that the Jumhur understood to mean do not repeat your wudu, to explain it in a completely different way. However, the position of the majority is the position of the majority, which does not mean the stronger position all the time, but it gives you like a certain degree of comfort that it may be the stronger position. It is, in fact, the stronger position in this time, because if you listen to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, if you feel gurgling in your stomach and you're not quite sure whether something came out of you or not, do not leave until you hear a sound or smell some odor. And the fact that the Sahaba radhiyallahu alayhim, they never used to investigate the purity of this or the purity of that. The Prophet ﷺ used to be invited to food by Christians and Jews, and he did not investigate, did you wash your utensils before you cooked, or did you do this or did you do that? So all of this tells you that you should go back to the default, and the default in this case is whatever it is that you're last certain of, which is that you do have wudu. So by the way, before I forget, when we talked about when we talked about prayer and whether you prayed 3 rak'ahs or 4 rak'ahs, and we said that Imam Abu Hanifa said that for someone who has a recurrent problem, he should try to sort out, he acted upon this hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, that he should try to sort out what's more likely. Imam Taymiyyah had a nice position as well, which is quite strong. He did not separate between one who has a recurrent problem and one who doesn't have a recurrent problem, but he sorted out the word doubt itself. He divided doubt into 2 categories. Doubt with no probability whatsoever, so it is like the 50-50. I can't really figure it out. I can't sort it out no matter how much I try. And doubt where there is some,
hint of evidence,
likelihood,
yeah.
70-30,
Yeah.
80-20. Then you should go with the 80%, not the 20%.
So you're weighing the 2 possibilities,
Yes.
based on the evidence,
Yeah.
not just on random
But in this case, based on your recollection.
recollection.
Yeah,
Okay.
based on your recollection, because now you're wondering if you prayed 3 or 4. So based on your recollection, you try to sort out whether I'm almost confident I prayed 4.
Yeah.
It's 70% I prayed 4. So in this case, act upon the 70%. Proceed according to the 70%.
But don't obsessively think about this issue while you're praying, though, right?
No, because that could ruin the rest of your prayer. Certainly, you can have
Yeah.
no concentration.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have any other questions from the audience?
Yes.
Okay, inshallah, go ahead.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh.
Well, yeah.
You just mentioned that the Islamic way of treating obsession is just to cast the doubt away. But I say I suffered from almost all kind of obsession. Obsession in acts of worship and obsession in just normal daily life practices. It's not that easy just to cast the doubt away, because I was advised by many people, just cast it away. Just, you have prayed 4 rak'ats, you have made ablution, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy just to cast the doubt away. So if there are any other things just to help us to cast this doubt away?
Okay, well, that's a perfect question, because it may be an introduction for the next segment when we'll be, inshallah, we will be joined by a psychiatrist. Because at times it could certainly be beyond your capacity. And the Prophet ﷺ indicated that psychiatric conditions may be treated by chemicals. And that was quite pioneering and quite advanced for the time. There is a hadith in Bukhari in which the Prophet ﷺ said, عَلَيْكُمْ بِالتَّلْبِينَ فَإِنَّهَا مُجِمَّةٌ لِفُؤَادِ الْمَرِيضِ وَتَذْهَبُ بِبَعْضِ الْحُزْنِ. I prescribe for you talbina, which is boiled barley with some honey added to it, for it is good for the heart or the stomach of the patient or the sick person, and it takes some sadness away, or it relieves distress, relieves depression. And boiled barley has tryptophan. Tryptophan becomes serotonin in your body, which is what is prescribed in most antidepressants. In other words, seeking medical treatment when one fails at controlling his obsessions by means of non-pharmacological interventions, those guidelines would work for the majority of people and would help the vast majority of people. But for some individuals, it may be beyond their ability to tackle this problem. So they may need a little bit of help, medical help. They may need to see a physician to help them overcome this. And hopefully in the future, inshallah, those guidelines will lead them through the rest of the way.
Are there any... Okay, go ahead.
The conditions of life forced me to overcome this kind of obsession. Because, when I try to repeat wudu and when it is very cold, so it's very difficult for me to do it. So these were some factors that helped me to just cast it away. But not just the advice, just throw it away, but some physical things, like about the weather, about some things like work conditions, when you're unable to repeat salah many times because you have a very short break. So sometimes other factors impacted me just to cast the doubt away, but not just the advice. This is my personal experience.
But let me tell you, this is not any ordinary, regular advice. This is the advice of the Prophet ﷺ and his prescription. So when one contemplates over this fact that this is the advice of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it will not be just another advice. Because if I am telling you cast the doubt away, who am I, to tell you anything? But I'm telling you that the Prophet ﷺ said cast the doubt away. The Prophet ﷺ said try to sort out what's more likely. So this certainly will help the believer. Yet some of the believers may have crossed the threshold where it is actually a disease that is hard to treat and that requires some assistance.
So this sounds like more of a case where it may be a disease then, instead of just because he said like the things that stop him from these obsessions are external factors like weather and basically things are happening around in the society, not necessarily what you're thinking. Okay, we're going to take a break, inshallah, and we'll be right back to talk about more about obsession and its treatments.
Be proactive. Dr. Haytham Al-Haddad teaches us how to take a conscious control over our life, set our goals, and work to achieve them in Islam. Take firm steps towards your future. Be positive and be proactive.
Every single Muslim needs to have in order to be an effective person.
So proactivity in Islam, how to serve our religion and how to serve our life and our guides through all of this.
The proactive person is always motivated. The proactive person always have high ambition. The proactive person, he will not lose his time. He will not waste his time. The proactive person is a generous person.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. We're joined in the studio by our second guest, Dr. Mansour Assaf, an assistant lecturer of psychiatry. We were just examining the issue of obsession from a religious point of view and also examining its definition. Now we're going to talk about the definition of OCD from a psychiatric or psychological point of view. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thanks a lot for inviting me to that for your episode today. And it's a very good item to speak and subject to speak about, especially that OCD is a very, very common disorder. It's found in around 1% of the whole population. In other studies, it was found in reaching around 3 or 5%. So you can imagine how frequent it is. If you have a class of 30 students, you might have one in every 2 or 3 classes with that disorder in a school, and you can measure that in any other community. Yeah. So it's one of the commonest disorders. It's one of the anxiety disorders. We have many anxiety disorders. It's one of the severest anxiety disorders in which the patient is really suffering.
Yeah.
The main reason of his suffering is he has an intact insight. He knows that he's having a problem. He's suffering. He can't control it. There are other psychiatric disorders in which insight is lost. So he's not having that suffering and that resistance.
Yeah.
About OCD, it's a syndrome. It's not just a disorder. It's composed of 2 components. It can be obsessions, which is the recurrent, silly, bizarre ideas. It can be also images, not just ideas. It can be urges. All of that under the category of obsessions.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there is compulsions. Compulsions is the acts. It reaches the behavior in which the person make some behaviors or acts just trying to relieve himself.
Yeah.
To try to relieve this obsession and this anxiety and these worries he's having. Sometimes the disease or the disorders come in the form of obsessions. Sometimes it comes in the forms of compulsions. The compulsions may be behavior or even mental acts,
Yeah.
like counting or such stuff. It can be mixed also. That's just the definition. The main problem is that the realization of this idea by the person is that that it's his own ideas.
Right.
So he has severe guilt feeling.
So
How
he
can
has to realize he has the problem first before
realized.
it's reaches a severe point.
He realizes that he's suffering from it.
Yeah.
He's suffering from it.
Okay, so what are the categories of people with OCD? What categories do they fall in?
Okay, I mentioned some of the categories. There are some pure obsessions, some pure compulsions, and the other third category is the mixed. It's very common to have comorbidities. One of the very common comorbidities with OCD is the depression.
Right.
When it's very severe and the patient or the person feel that he's responsible for these ideas or silly thoughts or bizarre thoughts, he can't resist it. He's had a guilt feeling towards it. He started to have depression, which may reach the severe form, reaching to suicidal sometimes, to be suicidal.
So can a person have the OCD without having the depression, or does it automatically lead to depression?
Yes, he can have the OCD only without the depression. But it's more severe if he's having a depression, a comorbidity.
Right. So what are the common compulsive behaviors? What are the most common compulsive behaviors?
Washing in our communities and the Islamic communities is repetition of wudu or repetition of the rituals. It differs from community to community, but that's what we see most in our clinics. There are also, as regard not the compulsive behavior on the behalf of on the category of the obsession, there are sexual ideas, there are religious ideas, which he can't stop thinking about it, and he is very annoyed by it, and he wishes to stop thinking about it.
So is it like mostly based on culture? So does it differ from culture to culture, these
Yes.
obsessions?
Yes.
And so
there are some obsessions which are common in all, like obsessions of dirtiness, obsessions of germs, obsessions of... these are common, but there are specific obsessions that are more according to the culture and according to the community, like what we have in religious community, like our communities in which there is such religious obsessions.
So what are some of the common obsessive thoughts that people may have? What are the most prevalent?
It's mainly fear of contamination.
Fear
The obsession of contamination.
Also of germs and things
Contamination,
like that.
that's the most.
So what can people do for therapy? What are some of the good things people can do to combat OCD?
Okay, first, before going to therapy, I'd just like to mention that psychiatry is an organic disorder.
Right.
The previous psychiatry is very recent science worldwide. It just started in the 50s. The most classifications for the psychiatry in the USA or in Europe started in the 90s. We didn't have a classification for psychiatric disorder before that, which is the ICD-10 in the USA in the States and the DSM-4 in Europe. So it's very recent disorder. The most nowadays, most psychiatric disorders were discovered to have some biological biases behind it. There are circuits in the brain. There are neurotransmitters in the brain which are affected. What's proved now to be affected in the OCD specifically is circuits from the cortex to the part called the striatum to the part called the thalamus and back to the cortex. That's what's affected. It's called the cortico-striato-thalamocortical. I don't want to go in just such scientific terms. Also, the neurotransmitters mainly affected is the serotonin. That's the main implicated. However, there are different subcategories in which not only serotonin, and there are very recent studies on other
showing other
neurotransmitters.
causes of...
So now, after understanding the main issue, there are also genetic factors involved in the situation. So after that, we start the research in the treatment started.
Yeah.
Treatment is mainly of two categories. First of all, we have, before treatment, we have to manage and we have to make proof that it is OCD. It's not just...
getting diagnosis first is very important.
That's very important because there is very fine borderline between what's OCD and what's not OCD.
What's just like borderline OCD or just something that he can fix himself maybe?
There are many other differentials for OCD. It's not, there are some personalities who are perfectionist. They are not OCD as long as they're functioning and as long as they are placed in the right position for their personality traits. For children, in children, they have compulsions which are normal. They like to touch things. They like to sleep with a teddy bear. That's not compulsion. That's normal behavior for that age group. Yeah. So, and there are a lot of other things, but that's the most common. Most of us, I can say all of us, can repeat checking things. Yeah. Maybe you lock the car or not, so you go to confirm that. That's not OCD. If you make it once or twice, that's not OCD. But if it's reaching the degree of impairing your functioning, your social life, your work, your everything in life, that's considered to be one of the evidence to be a disorder that should be managed. So
if it becomes irrational fear of locking your car over and over and over again.
As I mentioned in my definition, that they are silly, intrusive ideas. You can't resist.
Do you have anything to say about what was discussed here?
No, I completely agree. Certainly, he knows a lot more about this than I do. So I have to agree, I guess.
Okay. Well, what are the medications? What are the common medications that people take?
Before medication, we start by psychotherapy. The commonest and the most evidence-based psychotherapy nowadays is cognitive behavioral therapy, and there is a specific type of cognitive behavioral therapy which is utilized for the OCD, which is exposure and response prevention. We try to train the person to be exposed, and then after being exposed, make other things rather than the rituals he used to do to relieve himself. That's the main idea of the cognitive behavioral therapy. What I want to tell you that this cognitive behavioral therapy changed something in the brain chemistry. Yeah. Changed something in the structure of the brain. It's like a training for the weak points of these ideas. So it's an organic. It has organic bases. It has circuits that appear in some very advanced.
So it's almost as if the brain was hardwired before the wrong way. And
something like this. And I mentioned to you that the name of the circuit that was mentioned in the beginning. There is a disturbance in that circuit, and there is disturbance in the serotonin receptors and the serotonin neurotransmitter in the brain.
And so so how does the therapy work exactly? I mean,
okay, that's part of the cognitive behavioral therapy I'm telling you about, which is exposure and response prevention with its subcategories. The other side
is it like desensitization?
Something like that. You can say it's something like that. We expose the person to the cause, gradual exposure. He make a list of the things that makes him his obsessions, and then we start. It's sophisticated. It needs a whole session to speak about it. And the other line, which is now there is great advances in it, is the medications. Yeah. There are some sort of medications. One of them is SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which increase the serotonin in these sites, and it gives marked improvement. And there are also guidelines for the resistance cases, but we have very good results for people who are compliant on treatment. And the best is combining both. We combine the cognitive behavioral therapy associated with that medications.
So how can you help yourself? Say you feel like you're becoming a little OCD, but you haven't reached the point where you think it's too dangerous. How can you help yourself to not go past that threshold?
Okay, first of all, improve everything by building improve your lifestyle. Yeah. Take care of your health, your self-hygiene. In part of getting sport. Take care of your spiritual life by praying, having a good religious life. Give also a place for your social life. Yeah. When you stay with the person in a good social interaction, like the one you're staying, there are regeneration of some cells of the brain, and that improves your performance. So that's the three main pillars: your health, your psychological status and spiritual status, and the third one is your social status. That you can prevent going into OCD, or not OCD, all psychiatric disorders.
All psychiatric disorders. So exercise, diet, all these things are very important. So how prevalent is OCD? I remember you said 3 or how many, the percentage. But does it differ from culture to culture how prevalent OCD is? And are there like factors, our modern lifestyle, does it encourage OCD?
Okay, if you think about what I just said, that the 3 pillars, our modern life there are destroyment of mainly the 3 pillars, or they're attacking the 3 pillars.
Yeah.
Health, we're eating most of the time junk food. We're not sleeping enough. In the parts of the we're working all the time, not giving enough time for the spiritual part and the psychological part. Our social life is turning to be not that as before. So definitely the modern life is affecting that.
So technologically, like for example, Facebooking, is that sort of like a dangerous thing? People obsessively checking their Facebook or their internet or their email accounts.
Anything can be obsessive, can be a disorder.
Yeah.
If it's interacting with your life, and the functionality of your functionality, then that's the borderline which tell you that it's a disorder now.
So do you have any sort of like foods or any sort of dietary tips that you can, I mean, what are the certain foods that can help you, in your health, to not have these psychiatric disorders?
I think I just mentioned the hadith in Bukhari about talbina, which is boiled barley with honey.
Yes.
Which the Prophet ﷺ said takes away some of the distress, or relieves some of the distress. And like I said, it does help promote the production of serotonin in your brain. And there are many other food items that would be helpful in this regard as well, rich in fiber and things of that nature. And just generally speaking, healthy eating. We can talk about healthy eating from an Islamic perspective for quite a long time, but
well, can you just give us a little bit of?
Well, healthy eating from an Islamic perspective is, first of all, you don't eat too much.
Yeah.
Because eating too much does affect your health in various ways. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِكَ فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِكَ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِكَ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِكَ. 1/3 for your food, 1/3 for your drink, and 1/3 for your breath. Because if you really think about it, if you fill your stomach up all the way, it will encroach on your lungs and sort of hinder your breathing to some extent. So that hadith is such a beautiful hadith, and with regard to the amount of food, with regard to the approach to food itself. Do you know that nowadays in America, for instance, there is this movement for mindful eating, to eat mindfully. So mindless munching that everybody does when people are walking, talking, everybody's munching on something. That is not recommended. In fact, there is a hadith that's reported by Bukhari and Muslim from Anas radiallahu anhu, in which I think it is a Bukhari and Muslim, it's at least in Muslim, from Anas radiallahu anhu, in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade drinking while standing. نهى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الشرب واقفا. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade drinking while standing. So he was asked in Qatada's report about eating. And he said, ذَلِكَ شَرٌّ مِّنْهُ أَخْبَث. That is worse, to eat while standing. And that is particularly mentioned in the research on mindful eating. It's particularly mentioned that this is one of the reasons why we're mindless when we eat, because people eat while talking, walking, watching TV. So you really need to have a little bit of rituals for food. The Prophet ﷺ used to start by saying dhikran, end by saying dhikran, and to eat while sitting, and so on.
And to eat in moderation, not to overeat. And I guess like one thing that people can obsess about is eating from food, not in a wide variety of food, like sticking to, for example, bread, not eating vegetables, not eating fruit, things like that. Anyway, I think that's all the time we have for this segment. We will be back, inshallah, for more. Thank you, and stay with us.
Amazing stories. In this program, we get to know about people of the past whose stories were mentioned in the Islamic tradition and related by the Prophet, peace be upon him.
That verily us, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we tell you about the best of the stories. We tell you about the best of the stories. When we narrate a story, when we read a story, when we try to benefit from a story, what we are trying to do in reality is to go back through the steps, through the different parts and sections of this story until the story is actually completed, and that we can take the actual benefit directly from the story.
Sheikh Lutfi will narrate these stories in his program Amazing Stories.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered one of the lands to come closer, the destination. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered one whole city to come closer, to move closer to this dead person.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. We were just discussing some of the psychological, psychiatric aspects of the definition of OCD. Now we're going to go to the audience to see if they have any questions. Michelle, go ahead.
I have a question to Dr. Hatim. I would like to ask about someone has obsession in creed, Aqidah. How we will treat him? Is he still Muslim or not? How can I, if I have obsession in Aqidah, how can I treat myself in this field exactly?
Alhamdulillah. Well, it depends on where the obsession is in matters of Aqidah and what degree of obsession it is. You have the passing thoughts, and the passing thoughts or the whispers of the shaitan that can be thrown in your mind. And the Prophet ﷺ was specifically asked about this by the Sahaba, Radwanullahi alayhim, that they find in their minds thoughts that they wish to vanish and not have them. And the Prophet ﷺ said to them, وَقَدْ وَجَدْتُمُهُ, have you found that? Have you truly found that feeling? And they said, yes. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to them, ذَلِكَ صَرِيحُ الْإِيمَانِ, this is the proof of your faith. This is the proof, this is the clear manifestation or clear proof of your faith. And to have those passing thoughts is not the clear proof. The fact that they are suffering is the clear proof that they're faithful. So when someone finds it hurtful, painful to have those thoughts and tries to resist them and feels bad about them, that indicates that this person is a believer. And those thoughts are thrown into his mind by the shaitan. They're whispers, they're passing thoughts, and the shaitan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّمَا النَّجْوَى مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ لِيَحْزُنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Most certainly, secret counsel is from the shaitan to cause grief and distress to those who believe. So shaitan tries to do this. So you outsmart the shaitan by mentioning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dhikr, and confirming your belief. But then, if you have a misconception that is really like sort of boiling inside you, and I would recommend for you that you do not disregard it. Like if you have a misconception about something in the religion, for instance, you don't have good understanding of it. Someone told you of something that this is like an emergency. It's like a spiritual heart attack. And instead of taking yourself to the regular emergency room, you take yourself to the spiritual emergency room. But you need to arm yourself with knowledge. You need to arm yourself with good company. You have to find the right people who can give you the right counsel, who can give wise scholars who can give you the right answer. And you keep in mind that in Islam, there is a perfect answer to each misconception. The fact that you have not found it does not mean it is not present, but you did not come across the right person, or you did not work enough for it. At the end of Surah Al-Ankabut, Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. And those who strive in our cause, we shall guide them. That's a promise. We shall guide them to our paths. So as long as you struggle in His cause, be sure that at the end He will guide you to Him. And the Prophet ﷺ, so like I said, you make a dhikr, you confirm your faith. Knowledge is your best ammunition here, and the good company would be all great. And patience, resolve in solving the problem, and practice. As the doctor said, exposure. You expose the individual to the thing that causes him the obsessions, and then you try to wean him off of it. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ وَإِنَّمَا الْحِلْمُ بِالتَّحَلُّمِ. In a hasan or a sound hadith, he said, verily knowledge or becoming knowledgeable is through learning, is by learning, and becoming forbearing is through practice. Through practice. So everything is, needs practice and needs repetition. But as long as you have the resolve, you have reliance on Allah and faith in Him, you should be guided, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Dr. Mansour, do you have any last comments to say about our topic today?
What I want to say is that every person who's suffering from what we mentioned and what we mentioned the definition of, he's not the only one who's having that problem. There are lots of people who are having that problem. As I mentioned, there is a high percentage.
Yeah.
There's a treatment which gives very good results, and just if he come and present himself and try to seek help, he will find a very good help for it.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Mansour. Thank you very much. And Dr. Hatem Al-Hajj, thank you very much. And our studio audience, I'd also like to say thank you. And I'd like to remind you guys with our email address, talk@huda.tv. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much. And please join us next time for another episode of Let's Talk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but do not ever quit. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt. Success is a failure turned inside out. Let's talk and clear the clouds of doubt.